Shrey, would you like to come up and light the candles for us?
You up for that?
You might be a little slow.
Okay.
Oh, your leg.
I think we want the rest of us here.
What distinguishes candle from other lights is that it appeals to our soul, not just our eyes. And that's from him and Marti. Thank you, Shay. I'm Shrey. And welcome to the First Census Congregation of Atlanta's Celebration of Life. My name is Jan Lister, and I'm the facilitator today. And our musician today is the fabulous Craig Raffers.
It's Rayfuse.
Rayfuse. Okay, thank you.
That's all right. I've been correcting everyone my whole life.
Well, I still get Lester's. For some reason, nobody wants to say Lister. It's always Jane Lester. Instead of Jan Lister. Okay. All right, it's time for our opening congregation song.
Have a support group for that.
Please rise in body and spirit as you are willing and able.
What are we singing?
We're going to sing, so now is the song? Now is the song, yes. In the older song, all the songs will be in the older song today. 53, What's That I Hear? Phillips.
What? I'm sorry, what?
53.
53.
Give me the beginning of the melody here, then I'll count it. What's that I hear? So, 1, 2, 3. What's that I hear now ringing in my ear? I've heard that sound before. What's that I hear now ringing in my ear? I hear it more and more. It's the sound of freedom calling, ringing up in the sky. It's the sound of the old waves falling. You can hear it if you try. Do that again. You can hear it if you try. I see now shining in my eyes. I've seen that light before. What's that I see now shining in my eyes? I see it more and more. Well, it's the light of freedom shining up the sky. It's the light of the old ways of shining. You can see it if you try. You can see it if you try. What's that I feel now beating in my heart? I felt that beat before. What's that I feel now beating in my heart? I feel it more and more. It's the rumble of freedom calling, climbing up in the sky. It's the rumble of the old ways of falling. You can feel it if you
We are a philosophically based spiritual community dedicated to human liberation and founded on existentialist and feminist principles. By existentialist principles, we mean that we are what we do in the world and we accept responsibility for our choices and our actions. By feminist principles, we mean that we accept and actively support freedom and justice for every person. We support diversity as a source of strength, and we actively include everyone. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. And just a quickie, Edith, I just wanted to thank you for the musical that was held a couple of weeks ago here. It was amazing. You know, for those of y'all who saw it, if you weren't moved, you're dead. Remember the labors of love and the powerful history of this special place, which was deliberately and very cruelly taken away from them. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muscogee Creek, and we support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. Okay, at this time, I'd like to remind you to please put your electronic devices on silent. If you have any community announcements, please write them down and bring them up to me, and I'll announce them shortly. There should be pen and paper at the back. There is, on the table back there. Also, please feel free to move around as you need to during this service. We just ask that you do so quietly so as to not disturb other people. We have coffee and tea in the kitchen, in the back, and a bathroom near the front entrance, and there's also one downstairs to the far right as you go down the stairs. Okay. Our speaker today is Marti Keller, whose topic is the reading life. I'm sure most of you know Marti, and if you do, you know that she is a force of nature. I love her vivaciousness, her cheery countenance, her joie de vivre, her effervescence, her momentousness. Okay, I don't normally talk in this kind of hyperbole, although it's all true. These aren't words I would normally use in a casual conversation, but they are words I learned from reading. When I was about 8 or 9, my mom got me a book that was published by the Girl Scouts, and it was full of lovely short stories about girls my age. I don't remember any of the stories, but I remember that book. I loved that book. I must have read it a dozen times. That might have been my real introduction to reading. I also remember another book. My friend Jan had a collection of books for kids about various subjects, and they were bound in red leather and beautifully illustrated. And there was one of them that I just fell in love with. It was a book of poems, and they were fun poems. They were kids' poems, poems like Father William by Lewis Carroll, and the Song of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. It was great poems. Anyway, one day, I took the book home with me. Shouldn't have done that, but I took the book home with me, and I cherished it. And even though I knew it was a sin to steal, I still cherished it. And somehow, I just couldn't let it go. Even still, my conscience always bothered me about it. So about 5 or 6 decades later, I told Jan about it. She said she never even missed it, and that she probably would have given it to me if I just asked. But at least I got it off my chest. So I guess there are 2 points to this story. Firstly, I was a child thief. And secondly, some people will do anything to get their hands on a good book. I always carry books with me wherever I go, just in case I get stuck somewhere and I need a happy place to go to. Anyway, I am I'm really looking forward to hearing what Marty has to say about books and reading. It's going to be exciting. This is part of the beauty of all literature. You discover that your longings are universal longings, that you're not lonely and isolated from anyone. You belong. And it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. The things I want to know are in books. Abraham Lincoln. There are worse crimes than burning books. One of them is not reading them. From Ray Bradbury. So we'd like to take this moment to recognize any newcomers who may be here for the first or maybe second time. Anybody? You don't have to, but you want to stand up and tell us your name? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name. Brenda. Oh, Brenda. Oh, hey, I had a very good friend named Brenda. Brenda, if you look inside the little pamphlet here, you'll see the connection card that you can fill out if you want to get more information about us or, want us to find out more about you. If you want to fill that out, you can just put it in the collection plate. And, it's an opportunity to learn more about us through our communications. And you can indicate there if you want to get our weekly email blasts or our bi-weekly email blasts or monthly newsletter, which will tell you what's coming up. Okay, and now it's time, and welcome, Brenda. And now it's time for us to celebrate anyone who may be celebrating a milestone, such as a birthday, anniversary, special occasion of any kind? Edie.
Not exactly, but today would have been my eldest brother, Michael Edward Kelman's 82nd birthday.
Oh.
He was a wonderful brother. I've missed him for a long time. Yeah.
I know. Okay, so it's time for another congregational song. Please rise in body and spirit.
Number 33, This Little Light of Mine. So I want to tell you, I was on Thursday, I was with Stella Simonton and her family, Wade, and their children. And we had a funeral down near Selma in Marion Junction for her sister. And I sang 3 songs from the songbook that Stella picked out. This is one of them. And everyone sang along. And then we all sang at the graveside, I'll Fly Away. And I had the most amazing time. I'm going to tell you a little bit more at some point. So, just imagine, we're in this little church, like it's just out in the country, and it's just, basically it's just a stop on this railroad line, but there are 3 churches all in a row there. Amazing.
That's good.
And then, I thought, God, how many people live here? Here we go. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, I've got the light of love, I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of love, I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of love, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine.
And I think you need to recruit Diane and Marty for your dance team. Okay, Marcia is not here today, is she? Okay, well, we'll be hearing from Marcia, huh? But we will now have community announcements. The Social Justice Guild will be discussing the Southernization of America. If you need a link, please contact Libby.
2 o'clock this afternoon.
2 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you, Charlene. Yeah, so you have a meeting here at 2 o'clock?
No, on Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom, I'm sorry.
Libby will give you the.
Okay, thank you. WRFG 89.3, celebration of their 50th anniversary. Wow, that sounds like fun. Saturday, July 15th, from 4 to 8:30 at the old Rialto Theater. So, that sounds great. I love WRFG. Anything else? Yes.
Sorry, I didn't write it down in advance. Just want to let everyone know there's we have a geek chorus that sings here every second Wednesday from 7 to 9. What we do is we put lyrics up on the screen to oldies or whatever anyone wants to call out a song they want to do. We can pull it up on the internet. And I play guitar accompaniment. Sometimes we get other accompaniments also. But if you enjoy that, stop by 7 second Wednesday.
Is that every month, Andy?
Every month.
Can you send that to me for the newsletter?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
That means this Wednesday. This Wednesday.
Anybody else? Okay, it's now time for our silent meditation. You can light candles in memory of loved ones, or just sit and reflect. Feel free to move around, but if you do, please be cognizant of your fellow congregation at silent time. Thank you. Those 5 minutes just don't seem to be enough for me. I think we should change it to 10. It just makes me feel good. Reading gives us someplace to go when we have to stay where we are. It's from Mason Cooley. There is only one thing that can replace a book: the next book. If I don't give you a name, it means I don't know. I look at all these pages of just quotes, and sometimes I don't have it. The ordinary world becomes extraordinary the minute you start reading. And it's now time for another congregational song. Craig, refuse.
105, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
All right.
I picked this because Stella got me a room in this hotel right next to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So I had a big history lesson experience. It was more than a lesson, it was really an experience. And the next day, Wade and I drove around and saw a bunch of stuff too. Also, there was this wonderful docent there named Columbus. I bought
bought this, you know, the Bridge Crossing Jubilee newspaper from a couple months ago. You know? And I read every word in this. I talk about I am a reader. This is what I do. At any rate, the enormity of what happened there, I of course knew about it, and I've seen the film, but it just hit me. I just couldn't believe it. I'm still, my heart is thick from it, you know.
Craig, there are a lot of verses, so which ones?
See it?
There are a lot of verses, so which ones?
Oh, okay. We can cut them down to, yes, okay. Good point. Charlene, thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, let's do 4, okay? Is it all right just to do the 4 and then we'll cut it off?
And what page is that again?
105. 1 through 4.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down the street of the land. Ain't gonna let civilization turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let civilization turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down the street of the land. Ain't gonna let no holy turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no holy turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down the street of the land. Ain't gonna let no hills turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hills turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down the freedom land.
Get a little money, I buy books. And if there's any left, I buy photos. It's from Erasmus. And I put this one in the newsletter because I loved it so much, but I'm going to repeat it. A great library has something in it to offend everyone.
Here, here.
Okay, we are a generous and giving congregation, and I invite you to give generously in support of First E. Jim Rome said, "Only by giving are you able to receive more than you already have." So we can pass those around, and Craig Rayfus is going to play some special music.
Yes, I am. So when at the funeral of Stella's sister, one of the songs we did was "We Gathered Together." We're not going to sing it right now, but the words are written by David Arkin, and I thought it was Alan Arkin's brother, but I Googled him, is his father. And we have several lyrics in the book, you know, by David Arkin. And it turns out he was a blacklisted set designer in the York Theater in the 50s. And get this, so he wrote, I Googled him yesterday, he wrote the song "The Three Dog Night" had a #1 hit. Remember Black and White? But they did different lyrics. This is the original. The original 2 lines are reading lines. The ink is black, the page is white. Together we learn to read and write. Okay. I'm going to get to my real song, but before that, I'm going to do just a little bit of a Beatles song, you know. I read the news today.
When trouble strikes, head to the library. You will either be able to solve the problem or simply have something to read as the world crashes down. Apparently, reading during lunch and ignoring others is considered rude. I'm not addicted to reading. I can stop as soon as I finish the next chapter. Our speaker today is Reverend Marti Keller. Keller, that's what I said. Did I say Keller? I do. I'm sorry.
Look, Jane.
I meant to say Keller. It's written right here, Keller. She is entering her 26th year in union ministry with a mix of parish and community and justice positions. She's a past affiliated minister with the UU Women's Federation and currently on the board of UUs for Jewish Awareness. Reverend Keller describes her big life goal as beholding life and bearing prophetic witness to what she discovers, which is awesome. She has done this through her short verse poetry, her creative nonfiction essays and blogs, her critical and immersion journalism, her justice advocacy for women and girls, and her Unitarian Universalist ministry. Marty's relationships to books is both as a lifelong reader and as a writer. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Marti Keller.
Spoken since we got the steps, so God bless you. It's always a crapshoot. I'm gonna get up there. So we all know that Father's Day is a few weeks past, and I know that. A day that I always make sure that I recognize if I'm up in a pulpit or at a podium, by observing, though, that like Mother's Day, it's experienced differently by each one of us. For some, it's an unmitigatingly joyous celebration. For some, it's painful, and for others of us, it's complicated. Whether we're fathers ourselves, or children of fathers that are in our lives, or partners of fathers. But I would put myself in the latter category, a complicated one. You see, I was the only daughter of a man who had 4 boys, who couldn't figure out how to be with a girl in an appropriate sort of safe way. So it was hard for him to even hug me. He just couldn't figure out how to be with a girl in that way, but with whom I always shared a rich intellectual partnership, a rich reading life, and 14 years of healing companionship when Richard and I moved from the West Coast here, partly to be closer to him as he aged and retired from the Centers for Disease Control and grew quite infirm. My reading life, wondering why am I, you have to always follow with me why I'm going to talk about something. The reason I talk about him, and we'll talk about him, is I think there's a through line between my father's reading life and my reading life. I remember visiting him often when he lived in a pretty fancy high-rise apartment in Buckhead during those years, knocking on his apartment door and then letting myself in because he was sitting at his round dining room table with his white undershirt on, suspenders, a drugstore reading glasses, always with a book propped up on a book holder and a reading lamp, necessary for him, the book holder by that time, because his multiple sclerosis made holding up anything, including his beloved birding binoculars, which he could no longer hold up after a while, difficult, and then finally impossible. So I recall my husband and I commenting often how my dad was still reading hard books. You know what I'm talking about? Hard books, heavy books on scientific subjects. Not unexpected for a man who had published hundreds of academic papers on his research in the field of infectious disease, dengue fever, malaria, polio. My father worked in the first polio lab.
Wow.
He headed the tuberculosis unit at CDC, infectious diseases. Wouldn't you love to know what he thinks is going on now?
Oh, wow.
But he died before COVID. Anyway. Not unexpected for someone who grew up in an ethnically Jewish neighborhood in the Mattapan, Dorchester section of Boston. Any of you know where that is in Boston?
Yes.
As a teen, going regularly to Franklin Field to flirt with the girls, but also to Boston Commons to bird watch, and then always to the neighborhood library to check out the many books that shaped his expansive reading habit and caused the editors of his high school yearbook to describe him as a thoughtful brain. "Still waters run deep" was the caption on his high school graduation photo. His early voracious reading practice as a son of first-generation, barely English-speaking immigrants might well have something to do with what my Jewish learning website, it's a really good one, reminds us that not for nothing are the Jews called the people of the book, saying that across the ages, Jews have been a literate people who valued reading and writing and communicated that to their children, even before the idea of mass literacy was widespread. Producing mountains of books as well, by the way, really big writers as well as readers. But I wondered how his daily devotion to reading, and it was devotional, I want to make that point early on, it was a devotional practice. A reading life could truly be so when this brilliant medical researcher and in many ways Renaissance man had begun already to lose much of his short-term memory. In fact, truth be told, to lose his memory at all, who in a few years no longer would recognize his own children, at least not consistently. And if you've ever had that happen to you as a child, it's very sad. So after a while, he really didn't know all the time who I was. Then a look through his mail for bills to pay, which Richard and I began to have to do to make sure there wasn't something he wasn't paying, revealed his membership in a Science Book of the Month Club, probably the Scientific American Book Club, with those hard books sent to him automatically, with no need for him to look to see what he wanted to order or pay for, because it would pay for out of his bank card, allowing him to use his reading muscle memory. His reading muscle memory to mimic the actual reading of them long past the time he could comprehend or even recognize the words on the page. How sad. A Book of the Month Club selection. It all made sense. Oh, of course. Of course. How many of you lived in households where Book of the Month Club selections were delivered by the U.S. mail? Some of you. A choice of 5 to 7 new hardcover books each month. The club focused from the beginning on debut and emerging writers, helping to launch the careers of authors like Ernest Hemingway. The Sun also rises with a book selection in their first year of operation in 1926. Did you know that? I mean, that's one of the reasons people found out about him. And in its 10th year, 1936, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. There were more than 500,000 subscribers within 20 years. And after a while, it kind of lost its whatever was going downhill. They sort of shut it down and brought it back in 2015. And during the pandemic, it got discovered by thousands of millennial and younger Gen X young women who used the books as a way of sort of peopling, booking their own book clubs. Thousands of them became readers because of Book of the Month Club. Cool. The way it worked from the start was that the curated books were shipped to all members unless the order was declined. Month after month after month, they just came in the mail. That's a lot of books arriving in the mailboxes and on the doorsteps of Americans seeking some sort of convenient, regular reading life. Imagine, thousands of them in the U.S. mail for this many years. Some of the others of you may have had a Reading Life home library built on Reader's Digest condensed books. Yeah. Let's see hands here. Don't be ashamed. Or children's books from the Junior Literary Guild, or in my case, Scholastic books that we ordered at school and brought home with us. Having books sent to, so, as one you told me, having books sent to her mother was a wonderful luxury, wherever they came from. If you can imagine, in the 1950s, 60s, whatever, Dad takes the car, woman home. She has no way really to even get out to the library, let alone a bookstore. For her, it was the way she could get books, to share those books, to create a reading life for her children. So we need to stop being so snobby about it. For me and my children, there were shelves of books and boxes of books that trailed us across the country several times. Thick ones, hardcover ones, and mostly I later discovered the same kind, the same ones I used to judge as middle-brow Book of the Month Club selections, as all of the other families in our suburban neighborhoods where we landed. There was the new color television and lots of books in the Book of the Month Club. Mixed in with the remains of the required college texts my parents were always intending to reread for pleasure. How many of you made that promise to yourself? Did it? The same yellowing, musty books that my father left behind when he went into assisted living and we stored in a storage locker for many years. And then after he died, both the well-worn, well-read books and the never-touched books that were dropped off at a library branch in Decatur for the next fundraiser. Precipitously dropped off by my brother, who really just wanted to get the stuff handled. I still wish I had had the chance to go through my father's books, to read some of them pages, to finger them, even to keep them, out of some sense that knowing more about the reader my father was would teach me something more about the man he was. What was he reading all of those years, except for scientific books? As for my emerging reading life, thanks to my father, I was gifted with a smattering of books on holidays. Black Beauty and Little Women, which are still uncontroversial today, I believe. To Kill a Mockingbird, which I read as a teenager, banned shortly after publication for what was viewed as a racially inflammatory bent and the subject of rape. And this one, Be Still My Heart, The Diary of Anne Frank.
Yes.
Very recently attacked. It wasn't attacked, and it was hard to get a hold of when I was a kid because my parents really didn't want me to read it as Jews after the war. They weren't easy to get a hold of. I think I first saw it in some kind of comic book form or something, but it wasn't banned then. But it was recently attacked, and in one instant banned in the state of Florida for Anne's description of her pubescent longings in its graphic novel version.
Oh, heaven forbid.
Like so many others, it was also the town children's libraries and later other libraries that actually propelled my reading life. I would bike many blocks and then I spent hours in the stacks choosing them or in a quiet corner of the grounds, devouring the whole Little House series, which by the way now is problematic, but at the time I read the Little House books or The Hobbit. A whole summer of my junior year in high school spent biking to the adult library to borrow stacks of books read on long afternoons in my friend Janice's bedroom, gorging on free reading, and also on tabs. Remember tabs? Drinking lots of tab, gorging on tab, and gorging on free reading. Books that weren't the ones we should read ahead for our senior year in high school, or books that we should be reading so we do better on the SAT. You know those books, don't you? Those books. We got to read whatever we wanted that summer, and it was just a preface for going off to college and doing whatever we wanted. It was great. My husband, on the other hand, was raised in one of those almost bookless households. Some of you, did any of you come from those where there weren't too many books? Only 2 books, he says, were permanent features. The one was For 2 Cents Plain, right, Richard, by Harry Golden. Do you remember the other one? No. Only 2 books were permanent fixtures, while any others, the one at a time that his mother might have read, she actually did, were quickly disposed of, given away. Despite this, my husband found a way to a reading life. As long as he remembers loving to read novels, completely losing himself in another world away from the hot, dusty Phoenix summers. Surprised that so few of his elementary school classmates read in their spare time, and he became a writer, and I'm advertising to me. Yes, he has written 3 science fiction books. As his last one just came out, Slipstreaming Away, Salvation, Richard Cohen. And I am a writer, so we get to see. My first book was for Harcourt Brace Jovanovich, The Inner Parent Raising Ourselves, Raising Our Children. It was excerpted in Family Circle and Women's Day magazine, and don't make too much fun of those. They go to millions of people. We were thrilled, so I wrote that. I wrote several poetry books. This was one, Southwest Poems by Marti, Keller. I'm not going to show them all to you, but... And then I co-authored, co-edited Jewish Voices in Unitarian Universalist that came out of Skinner House Press. So I'll say that a reading life can lead to a writing life, and there are lots of writers among you as well. So. One you told me that she has loved reading all of her life, even though she too grew up in a home without books. She and her sister walked over to a mile to the library every week. She told me that as she grew older, she discovered that the librarian, Miss LeCure, was her self-appointed censor. Horrified at the age of 14, she brought East of Eden to the checkout counter. "Do your parents know that you're reading this?" the guardian of the stacks asked Rimface. She let the teenager borrow and read it against her better judgment. And another Facebook friend shared that reading had been a big part of her life since she was about 6, moving at age 10, a short walk from the community library, where despite major troubles at home, she could indulge her addiction, which it really can be, her addiction to reading. Her favorite book at the time was Of Human Bondage, which she read over and over and over. We make our way to books however we can, don't we?
Yes.
We walk to them, we read to them, we drive to them, we get them in the mail, we get them over the internet. If we want to read, and we can get to books, and sometimes it's harder for other people than others. But so why the reading life? Why read books? Why keep books? Why love books? Here's the practical piece. A key to success from the standpoint of what's sometimes called the birth to work pipeline is reading at grade level in the 3rd grade. Students lagging at this point are basically at much greater risk of veering off the path in high school and dropping out. My own daughter could not read till she was 8 years old. Couldn't do it. But you know what? It caught on in the 3rd grade, and she's been a voracious reader ever since. We exchanged booklets all the time. She's an insomniac, so she reads day and night. But she made it to that, after that, at 8 years old, the reading life hooked in for her. In one research study, disadvantaged students were given 12 books of their own choosing to take home at the end of a school year. Students who took the books home had significantly higher reading scores than students who didn't, in effect just as positive as attending a remedial summer school, just taking 12 books home over the summer. This reinforces studies in 27 countries that kids who grow up in a home with 500 books stay in school longer and do better in their lives. Now, part of it is not just the act of reading, it's the practice of building a home library, because these students begin to see themselves as readers, as members of a different group. And I know now that often it isn't a library made of paperbacks and hardcover books, that libraries are on Kindles. I read on my smartphone. The thing is that these are books that they choose to read outside the required reading of a school or another setting. And this makes all the difference. 500 books in your household makes the difference for people, whether they think of themselves as having a reading life or not. You might want to think about 500 books in your home and what that meant. Sometimes we read to heal ourselves spiritually, as did Nina Sankovich, the mother of 4 children, who mourned the death of her beloved sister for 3 years, distracting herself during the day, sobbing every night, before committing herself to reading 1 book a day for a year. Typically reading 70 pages an hour, she would finish a book in 4 hours, still leaving time to do the laundry and carpool and care for her sons and husbands. This year, her first reading was a redemptive year of contemplation, finding in the process of reading and then reflecting on what she had read in a public diary a newly gained perspective and serenity. So reading is spiritual healing as well. And then there's a reading life as Unitarians. And you can all be Unitarians for the morning. I'm a Unitarian. It is probably no surprise that our Enlightenment-born and Boston-bred faith tradition has attracted and produced its share of admirable writers. To name a few, Longfellow, Melville, Louisa May Alcott, Charles Dickens, Bret Harte, and Emily Dickinson had a Unitarian minister with whom she corresponded for years about her poetry. So we think she's an honorary Unitarian, don't we? Because we like to do that. More modern authors included Margaret Mitchell, who at least was married in our first UU congregation on Peachtree Street, and Kurt Vonnegut. So however impressive that is, and we get to be impressed for a moment about how many Unitarian Universalist authors we have, and we can applaud, yay, you can do it, yay. More impressive, and this is impressive, is the role of our Unitarian congregations following the Civil War in what has been described as being in an aggressive missionary mode. Can you believe it? Unitarian Universalists in an aggressive missionary mode, helping not only to found new congregations, but new public libraries. They were interested, we are told, in informed thinking on all matters, religious and otherwise. And in order to be an informed thinker, you had to do what? You had to read. So that's why they did this. In 1862, when the American Unitarian Universalist Association sent the Reverend George Leonard Chaney to establish the first Unitarian congregation here in Atlanta, he not only preached to his congregation of 10, but he solicited the community for money for books. This small band built the first free lending library, which deliberately included among its patrons women and people of color. That's right after the Civil War in Atlanta. This example was so powerful that members living in Marietta began a public library there, also supported by Northern Unitarian congregations who sent money and books, and to which Oliver Wendell Holmes donated a full set of his published works. This is now the Cobb County Library. I guess that really worth some applause. We live in one of the most book-drenched communities in the country now. Who agrees with that? We live in one of the most book-drenched communities in the country, with the Georgia Center for the Book, readings at the Carter Center, open mics galore, intimate author series, and major festivals. Now, we might have lost the Decatur Book Festival. It's definitely on hiatus. But I met that many of you attended it. It was like a rock festival for books. 80,000 people Labor Day weekend would descend on downtown Decatur and go to different venues and hear book readings and have their books signed and just be in a place where the rock stars of the big book world would be. So much for the Midtown Music Festival that had 300,000 people. We're talking about rock stars. I hope it comes back. But in the meantime, we have a Jewish book festival, a star-studded Jewish book festival, which advertises itself as a page-turner from beginning to end. Get it? Page-turner? I want to say, just in terms of independent bookstores, I'm like right near Keller and many other independent bookstores. There are bookstores I can walk to, there are bookstores I can drive to. My first husband and I owned an independent bookstore in San Francisco for years, so I understand what independent bookstores are about, and Atlanta has an amazing independent bookstore scene to be proud of. It's a city that already has rich reading life soil. It's for us to decide how we can enrich a soil that's already pretty rich to begin with. My colleague minister, the Reverend Naomi King, daughter of the famous novelist Stephen King, posted on Facebook something about Read Across America Day, and I remember wanting to think whether I was being motivated or guilt-tripped. Because I always think I'm not reading enough, I don't have enough of a reading life, it's not intentional enough. I can look back in my journals, my morning pages, my scrawled to-do list on purple sticky notes, torn out composition pages, document how frequently the notion of a more intentional reading life comes up. How many of you know what I'm saying? Having a more intentional reading life. Reading like I used to as that shy child, that only daughter, a freckled, sallow misfit. I'm sorry, that's what I thought about myself. Reading anything and everything. It's the anything and everything of book reading that I'm missing in my life now. There were the books I had to read for college. There were the books I had to read to become a Unitarian Universalist credentialed minister. There's still the books I have to read for sometimes what we call sermons or talks in places like this that expects thick sourcing for our 25-minute weekly discourses, not just Bible interpretation. Lately, I've been reading scores of books on revisiting and disrupting religion. However, I would say I've read all 18 of the Louise Penny and Spectre Gamache books. I am surrounded by books in spare rooms, in guest rooms, in our bedroom, 3 shelves of them alone in our bedroom, in baskets in both bathrooms where old copies of Atlantic Monthly and Vanity Fair are tossed in with damp novels and books of essays on wrinkled necks. There are books stashed in plastic remote holders to read during commercial breaks of television. There are books in canvas bags. There are books in the backseat of my car. There are books in the basement waiting to be be donated if I can only get myself to part with them. I have at least 40 full-length and many books stored in my Kindle, and I've rediscovered my library card, so that's helped with that. Yet my quite possibly unrealistic goal after leaving full-time ministry now several years now of reading and commenting somehow on a book a day is unrealized. Not the random reading, the reading for the sheer hell of pleasure that I hoped for. It just hasn't happened yet. Then I had a thought for a possible project, and you might be interested too. Yeah? In this project-filled after-paycheck work I'm coming to terms with, I thought of this: finding my books, taking my literary direction from little libraries. The basic premise, we know this, of national phenomenon is that a book is placed in a public place, and one outside of the Decatur City Hall, a kind of cross between a mailbox and a birdhouse, in which people anonymously donate a previously owned book and a hopefully read book, and then they take the book away. Why not, with some planning, visit every little library in my greater neighborhood over the next year? Why not borrow a book, give away a book, and use this as a source of my reading menu, or mostly? Why not photograph them, leave messages behind about the books I read, which ones I loved, which ones I couldn't get into? There are healthy walks in this endeavor, a new way to explore the community, let alone coming across perhaps unexpected literary treasures. How shall we continue to affirm and promote the intellectual and moral and spiritual centrality of a reading life as a way of sustaining our democracy, access to information and thought, and supporting the inherent worth and dignity of every person to be who they are, to write what they want to write, to have themselves reflected in the books that they read? What would it look like if one of our visions would be to give rise to lifelong readers whose convictions are challenged and imaginations are stirred and deepened to create these conditions leading to a reading life? However we see that happening as individuals or in this congregation. Including protecting access to books for the many who can't simply buy books that are no longer available in public spaces like libraries or classrooms, who are not subject to endless review processes. How can we help do that? And I want to advertise at the end of September, Libby's going to be doing more work about how we can do that with band. Stay tuned. In the words of Henry David Thoreau, a reader himself, a truly good book teaches me better than to read it. I must soon lay it down and commence living on its hint. What I began by reading, I must finish by acting. Thank you.
Oh, you're so cool. Have you ever had a book that when you got to the last chapter, you kind of didn't want to read it because you were afraid the book didn't want the book to end? Yeah, Lust for Life is that book for me. Before closing remarks, we'll have our closing congregational songs. And please rise in body and spirit as you are welcome.
Number 41, The Gedankens in Pride. This is a big song, because it's about the thoughts that we get. And I want to say one thing too. Something I'm proud of that I did a couple years back was I installed all the bookcases at Karis Books. IKEA bookcases. So if you go in there. This will be the Gedankens.
Craig, would you play it for once so we can hear this?
Okay. It'll be like this. Die Gedankens in Pride, my thoughts really flower. Die Gedankens in Pride, my thoughts give me power. No scholar can master, no hunter can trap, no one can lead us. Die Gedankens in Pride. That again. Die Gedankens in Pride, my thoughts freely flower. Die Gedankens in Pride, my thoughts give me power.
So I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure. My conscience is free, with pride I'm a treasure. My thoughts will not cater to towards its favor. No one can deny these constants inside. And if this virus takes me and throws me in prison, my heart will burst free like blossoms in season. Foundations will crumble, the structure will crumble, and people will cry. Speak it against and
Wow, it says here that this song dated back to 1500.
Yeah, it's an old.
Pretty amazing. I'd like to invite you to attend our Celebration of Life next Sunday, when our speaker will be County Commissioner Edward Ted Carey. And it sounds like it's going to be really good. And in fact, I'd like to thank Craig Rayfuse for his wonderful music.
Welcome, thank you, always a big pleasure.
And as usual, I'm going to end with a couple of quotes. I do not want to just read books. I want to climb inside them and live there. I enjoy long, romantic walks through the bookstore. We don't need a list of rights and wrongs, tables of do's and don'ts. We need books, time, and silence. Thou shalt not is soon forgotten. Once upon a time lasts forever. It must have been Philip Pullman. This one, it says it was from Frank Zappa, but who knows who really actually said it. So many books, so little time. Thank you very much, Marty. You were fabulous as usual. Thank you very much. I hope to see you guys next week.